All right. We've got Peter's 10 here. All right, let's hear it. Okay. All right. So, the first thing that we need to look at is perception of time. Mm-hmm. Because our perception of time is different than what it actually is. And when you're playing this, each one of your measures has a very good perception of time. Yeah. But compare one measure to the next measure, and you either lose clicks or you gain clicks. Yeah. So it's all about keeping a perception of time that is linear throughout the entire piece and steady. So why don't we try this thing again, and I'm just going to give you a click so you can hear where you are, okay? See right there, the very first one. Yeah. Let's try it again. Just keep going, just so you can get the idea of where you are. That's another one I want to talk to you about. When you're doing tuplets, don't be so concerned with making the tuplet open and heard as a tuplet. The tuplet is going to be what it is. In this case, it's 4/3. So don't be afraid to just power through that thing. Keep the tempo moving forward, power through it. And that's when you're thinking about all tuplets, because the tendency with anything that's not a triplet, anything beyond the triplet, like a 4 tuplet or a 5 tuplet or 6 or a 7 tuplet or a 9 tuplet, the tendency is always to drag. Yeah. So when you're feeling through them, feel still moving forward, like you've got that hand pressed against your shoulder, always on the front side of the beat. Good though. Let me just see you play that measure to that measure. 1, 2, 3, here you go. Good, good. So when you're switching from loud to soft, always actively think about forcing those hands down. So that they're already down there for you. You're doing a pretty good job. The first 2 times that I saw you play it, out of the corner of my eye, I was watching you, and it's just, you're thinking about lifting. Yeah. And it's weird because it's the opposite of what we're taught about lifting. But in this case, and Miss T will tell you the exact same thing, you've got to think kind of the opposite. You will already lift because it's ingrained in you, but you have to force yourself to do kind of that marching band thing to get your hands down so that you can switch from loud to soft. I think it's actually harder to switch from loud to soft because you have to force yourself to lift really high to get them up. Okay, good. Now, you're playing this thing really well. One thing that I think we could improve is to make this thing a little bit more melodic.
Yeah, the dynamic range is kind
of... Well, the dynamic range is okay, you know? As you grow, your dynamic range is always going to get bigger and lower. And you don't really have a whole lot of problems right now in your technique moving from loud to soft or soft to loud. So as you play more, you will get your soft softer and your louds louder.
Yeah.
But what I want you to think about with these etudes, with any snare drum stuff, is how to make it sound a little bit more like a piece and not like an etude. And the way to do that in a case like this, it's not actually with the dynamics so much as it is with projecting the meter. And the meter can change, especially when you've got a meter like 6/8, because there's a lot of different ways to present 6/8, and it all depends on how the notes are grouped in there. But if you think about actively trying to project 6/8, then the music suddenly becomes different. Instead of it becomes this. Now that may seem like you're putting some artificial tenutos in there, but most of the time when people are listening to you play this, they're not going to have the music right in front of them, and you still want them to have a sense, perception of clarity out there sometimes necessitates that you add some things to the music. So in this case, being able to project the meter so that they perceive the meter as well as the dynamics as well as the rhythms and all that, if that means adding a few things here and there, it's not a bad thing. It's not a don't do in music. So why don't you try this thing again from the beginning? And if you want to, you can take it a few clicks slower. And I want you to think about projecting the meter so heavily that anybody that's listening to you 20 feet away will know that this is in 6/8 all the way through. Okay? Does it feel different? It's like, it makes it so much easier to follow. The only measure, the entire thing that I didn't hear 6/8 was right there. And that point, since you're coming off the offbeat, I mean, you have to put a little bit on there to make it sound like it's still 6/8. But those measures are the most important because that's how you keep people in it when you're starting to do these weird rests straying away from the rhythms that make it clearly 6/8. But if you can apply that type of thing to everything that you play on snare drum, it's all about perception of clarity, because we perceive on top that we're playing everything correctly, we're playing the correct dynamics, and it is, I mean, we tend to disregard the meter because the meter is the meter, because that's what's written.
Yeah.
But people can't perceive the meter unless you make them perceive the meter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about affecting the perception of the listener. Now, another thing, your flams are all very consistent. Can you try this? Maybe start from this second line here and try it with more open flams. Good. Don't let it slow you down though.
Yeah.
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Ya-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. 1, 2, 3, 1, ready, go. Yeah, so it's a little bit more difficult, but you want to have those open flams in your tool bag, because once again, right here in this room, I can tell that you're playing flams.
Yeah.
But in a hall, they're going to sound flat.
Mm-hmm.
And in the orchestra especially, in any ensemble especially, they're going to sound flat.
Yeah.
What I've found in playing with ensembles is that almost 100% of the time, you have to play flams more open than you've ever practiced them to make them sound like flams both to the audience and to the conductor.
Yeah.
So I would just practice being able to do really open flams and have that in your tool bag. And then, of course, your tight flams are just fine. They sound great. I had the benefit of having my teacher before Mr. Adams, and then Mr. Adams having me do all of these books and the Wilcoxon in the old American swing style, which is like everything's open, and instead of becomes and like becomes. So I had the benefit of having them show me both ways, so I was schooled in both ways. When you're starting off here, you kind of have to do some of that on your own, but understand that you're probably going to use the more open style to be clear in the ensemble. And soloing, you'll use the more tighter version. All right, cool. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about. Can you play this measure and this measure for me? Good. I love the way that the loud drops sound.
Yeah.
Can you make those sound more like those? Not those, but can you make those sound like those? Good. Yes. The buzz takes a second to project. Once again, it's perception. So if you can make the buzz last as long as you can, that time, I love the way you played that time. Don't get thrown off by the pseudo staccato marks that are on top of those. They're going to be separated by the fact that you're giving a tap and then a buzz sound. They're two radically different sounds, so they're going to sound separated.
Yeah.
But you want the buzz to be perceivable, so that and then when you practice these, you're already doing it very well, dropping the one and then the other. That skill is going to transfer immediately, because when you learn Pique Dame, the snare part from Pique Dame, that's literally all it is. That's that technique.
Yeah.
So keep working on that, but focus on keeping them long and open. avoid the buzz sound and always keep the multiple bounce sound. Never think that the buzz sound is going to serve you because it just sounds tight. Very good. All right. Let's start here and just play this line down to the piano. Okay. What is your stick pattern for that roll? Why don't we switch that around?
Okay.
And let's do a 4 and then a 3.
Okay.
Instead of doing a 3 and a 4. Try it. So it would be like that. Just do the roll. Careful, so you're not actually doing a 4. Do without the bounces. Now roll it. So the 4s are kind of hard to do, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why don't you try this? Just straight 3s.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Now, you're doing a lot with moving from the edge in. This time, can you think about raising the stick heights? Don't think so much about traveling from outside the drum in. Think about literally having your sticks move up in height. Yes. Don't be afraid of what you perceive as a suddenly open sound. It's not. Even right here, it sounds gorgeous. All it just sounds like ba. But you get so much more range out of your roll.
Yeah.
So when you're practicing your rolls, it's important. I mean, your soft playing is pretty good, and you keep working on your soft playing. Loud playing's hard. Loud rolling is hard. So what I would do when you're doing your rolling exercises is force yourself to get those sticks uncomfortably high and still get the triple bounce in both hands. That way you can get used to the way it sounds on top of it. And then when it happens in your playing, you don't get thrown off by that and think that you have to squeeze more. Because it really just sounds like a gorgeous roll, but it gives you more dynamic range. The other thing is, you want to, with all of your rolls, even if you don't write it down, you want to have a stick plan for every single one of them so that it can be consistent and it doesn't throw you off. When I was watching you, the reason that I asked you to tell me what your stick plan was in here was because when I was watching your sticks moving, it looked more like
Unmetered.
like an unmetered 7-tuplet type of thing. That what it did, since that one was a little bit different from this one, the way your sticks moved, your release was a little bit different both in time and in dynamic. So if you have a clear plan that these are going to be 6s, so you've got shoot. I use 6s for all of them, so they all have the same consistency.
Yeah.
Now, if you want a roll, the reason to slip in a 4 or a 3 to do like a 4-4-3 or a 3-3-4 is for intensity and color purposes.
Yeah.
It should have nothing to do with your volume.
Mm-hmm.
Really, if you think about in your own playing, really think about stick height controlling your volume and then a little bit of traveling across the drum.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you focus on, then you'll have a lot more dynamic range.
Yeah.
And you'll have a lot more control over your dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start to work on those 4-3s and 3s-4s, you use them for specific purposes, but you have a baseline roll. In my case, it's a 6-tuplet that works for you and gets you a good sound every single time.
Yeah.
So that's what I would work on. Now, can we try this again, same section, but can you do everything as triplets? So you've got a 9 on the first one. And stop there. Good. Perfect. I got nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Good. That's all I got. Nice.